Mojgan's here. Romeo joined us. All right, I think we're live. I'm going to turn this off and we're going to get started. Perfect. Okay, guys, I'm gonna quickly start with just going by, I guess, some house, not really rules, but just the traditions of how we do and run these things. So I'm going to go through what we're going to go over today. At any point you have a question, write it in the chat or feel free to speak up. We always have a question and answer section at the end of the webinar, but I personally always hate holding in my questions because I forget them down the road. So if you have anything that you want to ask and I'm talking incessantly, just type it in the chat. I've got Ara and Moshkin that will be keeping an eye on the chat as well and help answer any questions. If anybody has anything specific that they wanted to address or ask, this is also a good time to do it. We're kind of keeping it, I have a structure for the webinar, but of course, we like to keep it conversational. So if it goes wherever it goes, we will answer those questions as we go through. So this is a good time for you guys to ask what you wanted to go over or what you're specifically curious about investing in real estate. And if I don't hear anybody, I will just get right to it. I can probably not share my screen. I'm going to share my Google Chrome. Share. Bam.
You're making an offer. You're making an offer on property on roads.
I did yesterday, and they wanted a lot more than what we were willing to give them. So, but we knew that. We're just trying to lowball right now because why not? Okay. So, welcome to Real Estate Investment Basics. I'm just going to mute whoever's unmuted right now. I think we're good. That's it. Okay. So here's what we're going to go through today, guys. We're going to go over investment terminology. All right. So all the different terms that you may have heard. This is meant to be a basics webinar to just get your feet wet with getting comfortable understanding what investing in real estate is and the terminology and so on and so forth. We're not going to get stuck on a lot of these, but you do want to have a basic understanding of what they mean. We're going to show you how we at our team, at the Spring team, compare and give value to our clients as far as investments go and how we narrow it down to the best investment opportunities in the market right now. We're going to talk about pre-construction and resale. Resale means existing builds. So condos that are standing, houses that are standing versus pre-construction properties. That seems to be a very hot topic all the time. We're going to talk about renovations as one of the strategies that people do when they're investing in property. We're going to cover that. We're going to talk about what it means to leverage your home and leverage debt. We're going to talk about house hacking, becoming a landlord. That's a big sticky subject as well. And then we're going to talk about spotting opportunities because who doesn't want to know how to spot an opportunity? And of course, we'll leave the floor open for question and answers at the end of this. But like I said, you can write your questions in the chat. Before I start, guys, if you can write in the chat that you're all here and you're all listening, that would be awesome. Just so I know I'm not talking to myself and Ara is the only one that's listening to me. and then we'll get started from there. So, oh, there you go. Starting to get some messages there. Thank you. Flip versus buy and hold. So we're starting to talk about different strategies of real estate. Flipping versus buying and holding. They're two different strategies, but in a way they could be a little bit similar. So when you're flipping a property, you're buying a property with an intention to sell it shortly after buying it. You most commonly, when you flip, you will buy and renovate a property to bring it up in value and then sell it for a profit. In some instances, we have been seeing in our hot markets in the GTA that people didn't have to do anything to a property and sell it down the road for a big profit. That's obviously not a good strategy to have when you're getting into real estate investing, but sometimes you catch a moment when the market goes really well for you. Buying and holding, on the other hand, is a strategy where you, as the name implies, hold on to a property for as long as possible. You're potentially leveraging that property down the road, but buying and holding means you're probably going to put a renter in there or multiple renters in there and hold on to the property, build that equity, and sit with it until you retire, probably, at which point you can sell and retire like a king. Any questions? You guys can write them in the chat. That's pretty rare that you flip without doing anything. Isn't really a thing most of the time. Yeah, it isn't a thing most of the time, but we have seen it sometimes. So, right. Next, BRRRR. I like this strategy because I learned the acronym about 2 years ago and I thought this was really cool. But what this BRRRR stands for is buying, rehabbing, meaning renovating a property, renting that property out, refinancing it, and then repeating the process. This is a whole huge strategy. A lot of suburban markets in outside of Toronto are popular for. There's a whole wholesaling industry with real estate. And I'm just going to explain this really quickly and we'll talk more about leveraging. But what you do is you basically buy something that's potentially in a distressed position. Maybe somebody that was in there was a hoarder or whatever it is. You rehabilitate, renovate the property. You put new renters in there that will pay you higher rents. At this point, let's say you bought it 500 and you brought the value up to 700. Now you're able to go back to the bank and say, hey, first of all, I'm renting it out, so it pays for my mortgage. Second of all, I've brought the value up this much, so I would like to pull out equity out of my property. As per the Canadian, or I guess the Ontario laws, you can pull out up to 80% of the equity that you have in the property. You then take that money and repeat the process. And a lot of people have been building wealth this way. It's a little bit harder to do these sort of strategies these days because of the price increases that we've been seeing. But it's a strategy that's made a lot of money for a lot of people. Next. Okay. So here are the next couple of slides I'm going to have are basically really, really quick calculations that investors do when they're looking at similar properties. Okay, so we've got 4 very basic, very common rules of thumb that you look at. Again, don't want to dive too much into it, but the 4 of them are cash on cash. And what it means is a percent return on your initial investment. Okay, so for example, pre-tax income divided by total cash invested, that gives you the cash that you're receiving on the property year over year. Payback period is a second rule of thumb. You basically divide total cash invested on the pre-tax net income. The third one is break-even ratio. The fourth one is GIM. Okay, so I'm not going to get into it too much. I don't want to spend much time on this, but this is something that you want to be familiar with. The most common one is a cap rate. This is something that you've probably heard of before, but we'll dive a little bit deeper into this one because I think that's one of the most popular ways to assess the value of a property. So a cap rate is a quick way to see in a percentage what your return would be. It is used to compare similar properties, so it's not a perfect way to do this calculation. Obviously, more complex calculations are required to do a proper analysis on the property. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't take the financing or leveraging into consideration, and only a 1-year snapshot. So the capitalization rate is net operating income divided by current market value. Cap rate, so another thing too is there's no set cap rate that's good or bad. Different municipalities will typically have different cap rates that are prevalent in their market. And in Toronto, for example, I haven't seen many of that hit a 3%. Unless you're getting into multi-residential properties. Usually they're in the 2s, somewhere in mid 2s. Outside of Toronto, there are places that you can cap rate 5%. There are some type of properties that you can cap rate 7%. So it really, really depends on the situation and the area you're in and what's popular in that specific type of property, first of all. And second of all, of course, the area that you're looking at. Yes, like I said, there's no clear ranges, and they depend on the context of the property and the market. Next, cash flow. Cash flow is a big topic that I run into when I talk to investors all around. The biggest or the most prevalent theory when you read a bunch of books is that you need to buy properties that cash flow. And what that simply means is that after all of your expenses on the property, the rent that you get from your tenants covers all of that, and you actually have some extra on top. Now, this is the case with a lot of markets, but it's not necessarily the case in the urban communities. So like big cities that are expensive, such as Toronto, probably Vancouver, places like New York, other big cities where real estate is popular and expensive, you don't buy for cash flows, you buy for year over year value gains. Okay, so cash flows, they do happen in multi-residential communities. You can get cash flow right now in Toronto if you buy a duplex or a triplex or more. But in a simple like beginner investment strategies, cash flow is a little bit tough unless you're going further outside of the city. So cash flow means the amount of cash that you're left with or have to pay out of pocket at the end of the month after all of your expenses. Are you okay with everything so far? No questions? I'm going to be keeping a look out on those on the comments here. ROI. ROI is a return on investment, and it measures how much profit is made on an investment as a percentage of the cost of that investment. Okay, so pretty simple. I think we're all familiar with that, so we're moving on. Now, this is what I really wanted to show you guys. This is a sheet that we're very, very proud of. We're huge on sheets at the Spring team, and we have a bunch of them for all different scenarios of life. But here is how, oh, that's great. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna sign in. There we are. Okay, so here's a typical investment spreadsheet that we do for our investor clients. It looks complicated, but it really isn't. So if you're looking at what are these? These are columns, okay? This compares similar properties to each other. So in this instance, we've got 5 properties that we can compare at a time. On the bottom, this section right here, we have all of the assumptions that we're making for this specific case. So if you're an investor that's planning to hold a property for, let's say, the next 10 years, we put 10 years in here. Annual price appreciation, if we look back 60 years on the Toronto year-over-year growth, the average is 6 or 7%. So we just use that number. Of course, the urban communities are quite a bit more aggressive. We've been seeing double digits, but we want to keep it conservative in here. Mortgage interest rates, it's changed since the last time I did this webinar. So we're at a little bit of a different number here. Amortization usually is 25 years, sometimes 30. And then the down payment can be different depending on what type of investment you do. Most investors do 20% to start. And then over here, you can see your purchase price, your mortgage amount, your rental income, right? So this is our assumptions based on our research. And then you have all your breakdowns. So over here, it shows you what your monthly cash flow or cash deficit is. So in this case, we've got 1 cash flowing property and the rest are in a deficit of $200 here. We got 30. And then we've got your actual investment analysis over a span of 10 years. So you've got your principal appreciation of 6% per year for 10 years. We've got the principal pay down. So that's the portion of your mortgage that you pay off every year. And then you've got your total cash flow surplus or deficit. So even when you have, and this is what I really wanted to show you guys about the cash flowing properties, even when you have properties that cash flow negative, which means you have to come out of pocket every single month, look at the difference you have in your price appreciation and the principal you pay down. You're still significantly up and significantly better off, which is why we always preach that buying real estate anytime is a great time. And then of course you have your final closing cost, which is the cash you have or you need to actually acquire the property. So in this case, we're in the 200 somewhere, and it will depend obviously on your situation. And then we've got those little calculations that we talked about earlier, right? So we've got the annual rate of return, and then we've got the cap rate. Okay, so quick little summary for you guys. Let me close this and we're going to move on. I've got something in the chat. You should probably increase the rate you have in there. The rate or the interest rate.
Yeah, it said 1.5%.
That was from the last time I did this webinar was 3 months ago, back when it was 1.5%. Now it's like 2.5 for variables, over 3 for fixed, or closer to 4 now.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, I had a question. Somebody asked me a question, and maybe Ari, you know this. With all these interest rates rising, is the stress test also going to be adjusted up?
Yeah, it has to be adjusted up at some point. Not yet, but it will. It doesn't continuously go up, but speak to a mortgage broker for specific details on that. But yeah, it already has been adjusted up once.
Yeah. So we're at 525 right now, right?
I don't know.
I think we were. Okay. Next slide. We've got pre-construction versus resale, a hot topic for everybody. So pre-construction, a lot of people don't know and don't realize that pre-construction costs more than resale, which means existing properties, but there are definitely pros to it. And that is why pre-construction consistently gets sold out in the first day, in the first 3 hours of it being launched. So here's what we're looking at with pre-construction. The pros for it are you need less cash up front. As an investor with any property that is already built, you're going to need 20% down minimum. No questions asked. With pre-construction, you still need that same 20%, but it's spread out in 5% typically increments over a longer period of time. So it makes it a lot more accessible for a lot more people. So we mentioned that the payments are spread out. You don't need to get a mortgage until the property is built. And that could be 5 years down the road, 4 years down the road, 8 years down the road, whatever the case may be, and depending on the scale of the project. So if you're not in a situation today where you can get a mortgage, but you know that in 4 years, you're going to be in a significantly better position to get a mortgage, pre-construction is a great way to go. It will likely be cash flowing by the time it's built. So like we've spoken about before, Toronto is not a cash flowing city for investment properties, but 4 years from when you buy a property, typically you start cash flowing. With pre-construction, by the time it's built, the rents would have climbed up by that point and you've put down that 20% into the property. And the likelihood of you getting the cash flows to be positive is much, much higher. Pre-construction properties have warranty on them. So you're protected. Everything's brand new. And if anything breaks, you get that fixed. You don't get those kind of warranties on anything that is existing. And of course, if you have ever dealt with tenants, you know the merit or the beauty of this. You don't have to deal with tenants until the property is built, if that's even your strategy to rent out to tenants down the road. In Ontario, the rules and the laws favor tenants greatly over the landlords. So that's definitely a big pro in this case. Pre-construction cons is that you're buying at a 15 to 30% premium, typically, okay? And this is something that people don't realize, guys. I'm going to say this again. Pre-construction is more expensive per square foot than existing properties. It's counterintuitive to a lot of people, but that's the case. And this is the case because of these pros. You're able to get in to real estate, whereas in other cases you wouldn't be able to get into real estate, and you're able to build that equity much, much sooner than you would have otherwise. Okay, so we're buying for more expensive. There is uncertainty with timelines. Whenever you're buying pre-construction, they'll give you kind of dates on when things will be completed. And like 90% of the time, from my experience, there's always delays. And that's kind of normal with pre-construction. In some cases, it could be actually good because it gives you time to prepare yourself for closing, but there is that uncertainty with timelines. Timing of completion can be during a slow season or a down market. We have seen this during COVID. There were some buildings that were completing construction during the uncertain period where COVID started and people were super scared to make any moves or even go outside. And those people who were planning to sell, they kind of got hurt and weren't able to sell for the prices they were hoping for. And same with renting. And also you have to compete with other investors in that same building. So because the building is finishing, multiple units at the same time, you're competing against a lot of similar product. And whenever we have a lot of competition, that puts a downward pressure on prices. Okay. Usually in hot markets, that doesn't slow anything down or make any difference. But when things are a little bit slower, that could hinder your progress. So whenever you're buying pre-construction, you always want to have a plan B that you're going to actually close on it and maybe sell it down the road. Resale is your existing property. And the pros for resale is that you're starting to build equity right away, which means you're getting a mortgage today and you're starting to pay it down today. You don't have to wait for a certain period of time to pass until the market actually catches up to the price you paid for your property when it's pre-construction. And here you're buying at today's price and you start building equity right away. It is cheaper than pre-construction. And the overall ROI typically is best here just because, first of all, you're buying for cheaper and you're starting to build your equity today with your mortgage. Less uncertainty, of course, because you can go in it, you can smell it, you can touch it, you can hear the neighbors, you can see the status certificate and see how the management has been handling the property and so on and so forth. So you got your due diligence is a lot more certain. Resale cons. You need all your down payment up front. There is pre-existing wear and tear, of course. You need to be able to get financing today, so you have to be pre-approved, and you will be getting negative cash flow if you're looking to put a renter in there, unless you're putting a 35 to 50% down payment if you're looking in the Toronto or the urban communities of the GTA. Okay. I think we have a question. You should never buy pre-con with the intention to assign it. Always hold. Agreed. Very, very, very important. I know a lot of people are still doing that. That was a good idea to do way back when, but in today's day and age, we have seen pre-construction finish building and be just at par or slightly above their resale counterpart, where you're not able to pull out the money that you need in order to pay off all your expenses. So you're actually not even breaking even. If you were to sell it in assignment, you might be even losing some money. Usually it's okay, but most of the time you always want to be able to close on it and have that in your back pocket. Somebody unmuted themselves. I'm wondering if that was a question. Probably not. Moving on. Renovations. So a big thing we also hear from people is, I'm just going to buy a property that is not where, not in a great shape. I'm going to get a crazy discount on it, and I'm going to do a reno, and I'm going to do it myself, and then I'm going to flip it and sell it. And what we tell to those people is, if contracting is not your niche, it's going to be difficult. Here are the challenges of that strategy. The margins are tight because the labor costs and not having discounts on material, especially if you don't have experience in the industry, coordinating all the different contractors is really, really tough, and you have to stay on top of them. If you have a full-time job, that's really tough to do. And then when you're hiring a general contractor to do all that for you, then of course that's an additional cost that eats into your margins. With COVID, what we've been seeing is a lot of contractors being very, very busy. So there have been massive delays, and it's really hard to find labor. And secondly, materials. Materials have been also very, very difficult to get, and they're more expensive now. So that's what we said. Cost of materials have exploded. Contractors are booked way ahead. So if you're in contracting and you know how to get discounts on these things, and you're able to do things yourself, maybe a lot of them, you're fine. But remember that as a person who doesn't have that in your pocket, when you are doing renovations, you're also paying for the carrying costs of the property, right? You're still paying your mortgage, you're still paying your taxes and things like that. So every month that the property sits, you're paying more and more money. Flipping works well in a slower market, which brings us to a point where right now you're probably going to have more opportunity to flip in this market, because the market has somewhat slowed down. So right now what we're seeing is beautiful properties that are done up and that are finished. They sell, and they still sell in multiples, and they sell for good numbers. Properties that are, that need a little bit more work, they're sitting a lot more on the market, and those are easier now to buy for a better number. Okay, within reasons, of course, but that flipping works well in a slow market because those properties struggle to sell. In a strong market, like we typically see in Toronto, you're competing as an investor against people who are buying to live in it. So as a person that's buying for, my home for myself, and I can't afford something that I want, I will compromise, and I'll say, you know what, I'll buy something that's not finished, and I will finish it myself on evenings and weekends over time, but at least I have a house in Toronto or a condo in Toronto. So a lot of people do that in these hot markets like we have been seeing. But having said that, the market has shifted a bit, so there could be some more opportunity here. Next, leveraging your home. This is a favorite topic of mine, but we're hearing some rumors that shop might be getting closed soon. Right, Ara? Do you have any insight on that?
No, they were talking about not allowing people to draw from the equity in their home to buy other properties. Like if they were talking about increasing the amount of down payment required by investors, and also requiring that
then not being able to use the HELOC anymore, right?
That's what I was getting at. So not being allowed to use increasing the down payment amount, and also not allowing the funds to come from your home equity that you already have for that purchase. But that hasn't happened.
Yeah,
And
they have to pass.
I don't think it's actually going to happen. So if it was going to happen, it would have been announced already when they made all the foreign buyer ban and all that stuff before. It was part of that whole conversation. It might happen down the road, but I think the conversation's pretty quiet on that right now.
Yeah, I've seen some articles about this as well, and about how, the worry is that how Canadians are over leveraged because of this practice. But here's what this practice means, guys. So leveraging your home is what I briefly touched on earlier. And that is when you own a property and you have a mortgage on it, a portion of it belongs to the bank because you owe the bank money and you're slowly paying it down. But the value gains of you just being in the property for a year, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, that increases the value. So all that value gain becomes your equity. Same with the principal portion of your mortgage that you're paying down. Every time you make a payment, a portion of that goes towards the principal of your mortgage. And of course, your initial down payment that you had. So all of that is considered your equity. That portion of the home is yours. Now, you can pull out or go and refinance your mortgage on your home and pull out up to 80% of your equity of your home and use it however you see fit. And people have been pulling out that equity and investing it into a second property. That's a pretty common practice in Toronto, because Toronto real estate has been booming so much. People have been able to just multiply their properties. Now you have 2 properties. In 5 years, both these properties gain some more equity in them. You can pull out equity out of both or out of one of them and repeat the process. And you're ending up with more and more homes, but that's wealth that you're building for yourself down the road. Okay. Interest rates are not at all-time lows anymore, but they were last time I did this webinar. So we're starting to come up. And if anybody has any specific questions about interest rates, we can address that now, because I know there's some uncertainty around that, but we're still pretty comfortable telling people to go for variable rates for some reasons here. House hacking. House hacking is an interesting concept that I think a lot of people in Canada don't know about, but it's quite popular in the States. And what it means is basically you buying either a multi-unit property or, let's say, a house with a separate unit in the basement, and you're living in one portion of the house and you're renting out another portion of the house. Okay, and depending on how you structure it, there may be a way for you to actually not pay anything at all for your home because you're sharing it and renting it out to other people, or paying a very minimal amount. And basically your tenants are paying for your mortgage and building that equity for you while you're living in a beautiful home of your dreams. So that's an incredible way to do it. But of course, some of us are spoiled here and don't want to share our homes with people. So not a lot of people are comfortable with this, but this is a great way to also build your wealth and build your equity. Okay. If you are looking to buy a property to become a landlord and to rent it out, that is an excellent strategy. However, there are certain things that we need to know about being a landlord. Like I said earlier, the laws in Ontario heavily favor the tenants over the landlords. And that is because we have a lot of backlog in homelessness and in just Toronto housing to offer that to people. There's like a 10-year to 15-year wait. So they don't want any more homelessness to happen, which is why they make it very, very difficult for landlords to evict tenants. And because of the booming real estate prices, we've seen, right, people 5 years ago could rent a 1-bedroom for like $1,500 very easily downtown Toronto. And we've had restrictions on how you can increase rent for that. Those people are still paying like $1,550 or $1,600. Meanwhile, other 1-bedrooms are going for like $2,100 and being snatched up in 2 seconds. And you need to have, an $80,000 salary in order to actually even be considered to rent it. But there's a reason for this madness. And that's because, of course, landlords cannot evict people, right? So qualifying tenants, that's a really, really huge portion of being a landlord. You want to make sure that their employment, there's been a lot of fraudulent applications that are going around. So making sure that you do your due diligence all the way to like checking the social media of the person, checking their LinkedIn, calling their references, calling their current landlord, and verifying that the landlord actually owns the property, as well as checking their employment and calling the employer to confirm these things. Those are the things that are going to help you really qualify and make sure that the person is legit and their application is real. there are two types of insurances that both the landlord and the tenant should have. The landlord's insurance protects the envelope of the unit or the property. It protects from floods and fires, but it does not protect tenants inside the contents of the unit. So their clothes, their furniture, their valuables, their electronics, that is going to be covered by the tenant's insurance. You always want to make sure that the tenant has their own insurance. Maintaining unit in the state of repair is the landlord's responsibility. Minor things like changing light bulbs and changing filters, of course, is on the tenant. But if anything ever breaks, you as the landlord are responsible to make sure that that's taken care of promptly. So that sometimes means an emergency call in the middle of the night, unless you have a property management company that's managing that for you. Pets. A lot of landlords say that no pets are allowed, but you actually can't do that. So things like that. Deposits. Deposits are a painful subject for a lot of landlords because the government has very strict rules about what deposits you can and cannot collect as a landlord. And if you are a tenant or you are a landlord, the only deposits you can have is a key deposit that is refundable at the end of the tenancy and last month rent. There's no security deposits, there's no pet deposits, there's no furniture deposits that can be taken, but there are still a lot of landlords, unfortunately, in Toronto that do push for that. And because of how competitive our market is, they can get away with it and people are willing to do it. And the way that they structure it is they say that the tenant voluntarily offers this deposit. But just so you know, the law states that that shouldn't be a thing. Selling or buying a tenanted property also can pose a little bit of a headache because, again, tenants don't have to move out when you decide that you want to sell a property. And that may make it a little bit more difficult for you to sell. And buying a tenanted property, same thing. If you're planning to buy a property as a landlord and have it as an investment, you can't evict the tenant. And if they already have a low rent from before in a rent-controlled property, you have to just acquire that rent and carry on. Okay. Rent increases are an interesting also subject. Rent increases, we have two different types of properties. There are new ones that are built and occupied after 2018, which have no rent controls, which means once a year, the landlord can increase your rent by however much. So if you're in a newer building and you're a landlord, that's great for you. If you're a tenant in that building, not so great for you. And on the other hand, we've got buildings that are older and were occupied before November of 2018. Those are rent controlled, and the typical rent increase guideline that the Ontario gives us is 1.2%, 2%, up to 3% is what we've been seeing. Okay. Assigning and subletting, that's another thing too. As a landlord, you can't really restrict that. You can accept or deny a tenant, but you can't restrict your current tenant to assign or sublet, really. And then, of course, evictions are a complicated topic. So I just wanted to touch on that because it's loaded, and I know a lot of people don't know about this. I hope that was helpful for you. And as a landlord, you want to make sure you understand your responsibilities and your rights in that relationship between you and the tenant. All right, spotting opportunities. So we're almost at the end, guys. We're going to go to questions and answers in just a minute. And the way to spot opportunities is, well, first of all, being in touch with the market would be really good. We have a blog on our website at thespringteam.ca. We track the market once a week. Nobody else in Toronto does this that we know of. We haven't seen anybody else do this. Even the Toronto Real Estate Board comes out with their stats about 9 days after the month is over, at which point the market can and would have shifted already. And that's what we've been seeing because the market kind of changes week to week. So we're able to spot micro trends. And if you're interested in the market, I would highly, highly recommend checking that out. And so what you want to do, of course, is look back at the area that you're considering. What's been happening in the area? How has it been growing? How the past appreciation in price has been going? Looking forward in time. So what developments are to take place in the area? Other reasons or things to look out for that could lead to gentrification. Gentrification meaning increase of people or influx of people coming into the area. For example, Savoy lines, future commercial builds, city plans, etc. My two favorite resources for that are Urban Toronto .ca and Toronto Development Application. So that's the toronto.ca website. You can look on the map and you can press on all the dots and see where all the applications for future developments are, which is excellent. Looking at the property specs themselves. So like age of, let's say, the house or the building, layout is super huge. Diagonal weird walls usually don't do so well. Maintenance fees, if you're looking at condos, maintenance fees that are reasonable are anywhere between 65 to 85 cents per square foot. That's what we've been saying. If you're getting to like $1,000 a month on maintenance fees, that might be a little bit tougher to sell. Views from the unit or the property, demographics in the area, how accessible is the property to the TTC, local amenities such as groceries, entertainment, schools, dining, all of that determines the crowd that will be around there. And that also will help you determine what type of a renter you will likely get. And of course, the snapshot comparison with formulas on our worksheet to find out what the best one is there. So there's lots to look out for. Of course, if that sounds very tedious and confusing and difficult, you want to talk to us or a professional in general. And that will help you narrow down a little bit, because we already know which properties are good versus bad and which areas are better. And like I said, right now the market is propped up really well for investors. This is probably a good segue to talk about what's happening in the market. There is a great opportunity right now. So we just came out of a really, really, really aggressive hot market for sellers. Those people were buying first. If let's say they're upsizing, they're buying a property first because that's difficult, and selling it afterwards because that was easy. They could sell in like 3 days. Now the market has shifted, and all those people that have bought are now selling in a market that is significantly cooler. Not all around, of course. Because Ara's gonna cringe right now for me saying that. It's not happening all around, but the market is cooler overall. So a lot of the people who have bought properties are now selling in a market that's cooler, and they need to sell because they already bought. That presents an opportunity window for the next 6 to 8 weeks where the buyers can come across potentially desperate sellers and get numbers for properties that would not have been possible by a long shot 6 to 8 weeks before that. I don't know if Ara wants to add anything about that, because you're the market guru, but I think that's a great way to segue into the end of the meeting.
Yep. Oh, where'd you go?
I'm here.
You still there? Oh, okay. Sorry, the screen changed. Yeah, I mean, Mila's right. The market right now, there are opportunities for some people that are in a position where they've bought already and they need to sell. Like my clients last week took advantage of an exact situation just like that, where these people, it was about 2 months ago, they had bought a property not far from where they live now, and they put their property on the market after. But the market changed in between that time they purchased and they were going to sell. They were getting ready to stage it, etc. So they put their house on the market, and they actually turned down an offer because they didn't feel like it was high enough at that time, and they stayed on the market. Well, they stayed on the market long enough for my clients to buy that same house for 300 grand less than the offer they had rejected a couple of weeks before. Luckily, they were still able to make that purchase, but these people were in a position, and luckily, like, I know a lot of people in the neighborhood, so I found out that these people had bought. And so we used that, and we made this amazing purchase for our buyers. So Mila is also correct when she says this is a window that's not open forever, right? There's a lot of, like, the market has shifted already. So people are making smarter purchasing decisions and selling decisions right now. So this window is closing soon. So these kinds of deals, like Toronto is generally not populated by desperate, over-leveraged sellers. If most people, if they haven't made a purchase yet and they're not getting the price they want for their home, they don't just drop their pants and sell it for whatever they get. They take the property off the market and wait for the market to improve. That's essentially what the buyers of Toronto have been doing during any other previous downturn, like we experienced in 2008, in 2017, and just now here. Also, let's all remember that what's happening right now with the market is the exact same thing that happened 2 summers ago, the first summer after COVID. It was off to a roaring start in March, and then people realized how much properties were selling for. And then by the time a whole bunch of listings came to market, it just added too much supply. And by the time summer, July, August came around of 2020, there was enough supply to satisfy the buyer demand, and prices stopped aggressively appreciating, and it turned into a bit of a buyer's opportunity at that time. But then sellers weren't getting the prices they were used to getting, and they just pulled their properties off the market. And guess what that created? That created another situation where we had a decreased supply. So when the fall market came around, we had another lack of supply issue. The only big difference right now versus those other times is our inflation numbers, which are historically, at highest they've been in a very long time, and the pending interest rate increases beyond the one that just happened yesterday. So those two things have taken some buyers out, and they've added some of the more cautious sellers to the marketplace. So we've had a tremendous amount of listings added in the condo market. Not as much for houses, but it's still doubled since February for both condo and house listings. So but right now we're going to see, a lot of uncertainty in the air. But let's remember, we're comparing today to the absolute insanity of January and February. It's not normal for a property to sell in 5 hours with 20 offers. That's not a normal situation. Right now, there's no reason to freak out if your property takes 2 weeks to 30 days to sell. That is normal. Okay, so we have to understand what exactly we're calling a slowdown or a downturn. There aren't properties that would have sold for $2 million yesterday that are selling for $1 million today. There's no major discounts on the market in a grand, at a grand scale. There are some discounts available, like the story I just described, but there aren't mass discounts available, and people's homes aren't worth 20, 30, 40% less today than they were before all of this started. So just so that's clear. What's this question? That's the City of Toronto website. Just Google City of Toronto development applications and you'll come across the website. And of course, springteam.ca/blog is where we have our weekly market reports. Mila, if you want to put that in the chat as well. That's the spring team. Come on, you got to add the in front of the spring team. So I don't know what else to say to that, but for example, just as we're on this webinar right now, Mila and I have a property listed at 357 Rhodes Avenue. I have another one listed with our other agent, Matt Gravina, at 100 Knox Avenue. And this one agent is emailing me asking me if my clients are open to preemptive offers.
Yeah, I saw that.
So you have to understand that stuff is still selling for record, not the previous massive records that were being set in January and February, because there was literally no option for buyers other than that one house that 25 million people were going after. But don't get it twisted. You're not going to go out there and be able to bend a seller over and completely, take them to the cleaners with whatever price you get. There are still a majority of properties that are in good neighborhoods that are in great condition are selling with competition.
Well, houses, yeah, specifically freehold properties. There are some a little bit.
Yeah, condos are softer for sure.
Yeah,
condos are softer.
We're trying to run people over in houses right now. It's not working, so I'll be the test.
Yeah, I guess we shouldn't use that term. I just didn't know, but I forgot what we're talking to here. But it's a little bit more difficult to. Always classy. I'll figure out another way to phrase that next time. So I don't know. Any other questions out there? It's a small group this week. We had a restructuring in the company, so we didn't get the chance to promote this webinar as aggressively as we normally do. But the recording is going to go out, so your questions are going to help other people. So let's hear them. Anybody? Maj, maybe you can ask a question. Sophia, you're on video at least. So that's confidence. I like that. How about you? How about you bust out a question for us as an aspiring real estate agent?
You're muted. She's like, I don't have any questions.
No, I'm not sure actually what to ask. I actually I know a family friend who is invested constantly, and now he got something in Toronto, and then he got something Trenton and way far. So, and I always ask him, why do you invest so far where you live, in the GTA? So
I can answer that question. What did he say?
So he said, he wants to explore because everywhere there's different. Some you can, over there you buy an apartment. Over here you buy a business unit. Over there's a plaza. Right. So it's random.
So this goes back to the conversation Mila was having before about cash flow, and a lot of these markets that are outside of the major urban centers that are overall cheaper, rents are still pretty high. So you can, if your focus as an, there's some investors that don't buy anything unless the cash flows for them. Like that's their focus. They don't care about appreciation. They don't care about anything like that. They just want the monthly cash flow, like income in their pocket. You're not going to do that in Toronto unless you have like 3, 4, 5, $10 million to spend. Unless you get like 5 to 20 units, you'll cash flow in Toronto. But in these markets, you can just get like a 2 bedroom house and it'll cash flow for you. But they're more volatile. Those markets are the first ones to take a hit when the economy turns. Those markets are like the first ones to start tanking in value if things aren't going so great out there. That's why I prefer investing in urban centers like Toronto. I don't care about cash flow. I just want to know, because I'm young enough that I'm still far enough from retirement that I can ride out downturns. So I would rather invest in a safer downtown environment where I know I'm going to get a tenant. I'm probably not going to have as many problems with my tenant here as I might in those rural communities. And I know that when I have to sell it, if I have to sell it, I can probably do it fairly quickly and put some money in my pocket when I do that. So I'll sacrifice cash flow for the safety and comfort of that. But if I'm somebody that wants to purchase, like I have a client who over the span of 18 months bought 15 properties in like rural communities. And luckily there's some of them have appreciated very well, but his cash flow replaced his work income. So he replaced his actual work income with these properties. And there you go. It's a very different situation altogether. And these properties were bought from $200,000 to $400,000 each.
Oh,
and as long as you come up with the 20% for each one of them, then you can do it.
that's awesome.
But I do have to go. I have another webinar starting in 8 minutes. So
Can you send me the link to that, by the way?
I will.
Okay.
Okay, bye everybody. Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks, Ara. Okay, guys, Ara's heading off here. I'm guessing there's no more questions left. If there are, I guess I'll keep it open for like another minute or so, but we're gonna start wrapping it up here because I do want to watch. Ara's actually doing a webinar right now with another very big agent in the industry and they're gonna be talking about the market and just, having a conversation about their experiences. And I would like to see that as well. So thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate you. Thank you for the questions that we did have. And we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thanks, Amelia. I appreciate the feedback.